2/3 of American voters are worried about the United States turning into a police state under the Biden administration. The poll described a police state as, quote, a tyrannical government that engages in mass surveillance, censorship, ideological indoctrination, and targeting of political opponents.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovich, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. So I think it was Thursday, there was a Rasmussen report that came out that said 2/3 of American voters are worried about the United States turning into a police state under the Biden administration. And the poll described a police state as, quote, a tyrannical government that engages in mass surveillance, censorship, ideological indoctrination, and targeting of political opponents. And I think that describes the Biden administration pretty well, don't you, Stephanie?
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, it's not even just conspiracies anymore. It's all this stuff that was labeled conspiracies in the past, we now know for a fact was censorship.
Mm-hmm.
And remember when we discussed how the U.S. Court of Appeals and the Fifth Circuit Court ruled that the FBI and the Biden White House violated the First Amendment by influencing social media companies to censor free speech around COVID and the elections. And this is going to go to the Supreme Court because the Biden administration is appealing it, demanding that they be able to continue doing it. So it's crazy. They got caught. And not only are they admitting it, but they're demanding that they be able to keep doing it. And they know that it's the only way that they're going to win and keep influencing Americans is by doing this shady shit. And so when we look at a police state having control over the media and feeding all of this propaganda is a core component. So I think we're there.
Yeah, definitely. And according to some of the survey results, 72% of voters in the poll are, quote, concerned that America is becoming a police state. And of that 72%, 46% are very concerned. And this wasn't just a poll of Republican voters. There were 76% of voters expressing concern indicated they were Republican, but 67% of voters expressing this were Democrats. So that's definitely saying something. And half the voters in this poll said that they agreed with the statement, quote, the FBI is a danger to the freedom and security of law-abiding Americans. And 28% of those 50% said they strongly agreed with this. And you know what? Had I been taking this poll, I would have been one of those who said strongly agree.
Yeah, well, like you had said earlier when you were defining a police state, it's like that totalitarian state. It's controlled by the political police force, and they're secretly supervising the citizens' activities. And I looked on Wikipedia and it said it's a state whose government institutions exercise an extreme level of control over civil society and liberties. And the first thing I thought of was the lockdowns. I feel like the COVID lockdowns were the big test of this to see what they could get away with and to put all their pawns in place while we were all, focused on our Zoom calls and the pandemic. They were putting up 5G towers, for example. And not to get too, into conspiracies with the whole 5G thing. But I just want to point out, I had thought that those were simply for better service and reception. It's not. It's for surveillance. It gives them the ability to accurately locate and surveil vastly higher quantities of data. And next week, we're actually going to discuss the company that owns the biggest 5G telecom service in the world. But anyhow, the European Commission and the European Agency for Cybersecurity detailed the risk of security threats because of the 5G and the access to these large quantities of data. And also talked about these DOS attacks, which means denial of service attacks that could make the service unavailable. So my thought with all of this is we already know for a fact that the Biden administration censored free speech on social media. But now that they're being stopped, couldn't they just do one of these DOS attacks and like cut off internet service if they really wanted to? And like the fact that my brain even goes there tells me we're already in a police state, that I think that this is like a possibility, you know?
Yeah, and you just made me think of like the elections, the ones I still believe we probably won't have. But the only reason I could see them not doing something like this is, you know how they're pushing everyone to vote by mail or to vote electronically? Like if you cut off these services, they wouldn't be able to do that. But how easy would it be to cut them off just after? And people aren't able to even verify anything because then we would have no internet. But now we are totally going down a rabbit hole.
Or in Republican counties,
Right.
you know?
Yes. Yeah. But one of the other questions that was asked during this poll was related to which political party is responsible for the trend towards authoritarianism. And voters chose Democrat over Republican by a 48 to 41% margin. And 59% of voters said they believe the country is headed down the wrong track.
Well, did you hear about a Democrat representative from Minnesota? His name is Dean Phillips, and he's thinking about challenging Biden in the Democrat primary. And he told Today, quote, "I'm thinking about it. I haven't ruled it out yet. I'm concerned there's no alternative. I'm concerned that something could happen between now and next November that would make the Democratic convention in Chicago an unmitigated disaster," end quote. So it's like, I think the Democrats realize that it's not looking good for them. And people, even on the Democrat side, are realizing something's up.
Yeah, they definitely are. And I also wanted to bring up before I get into that, I read this article in the Washington Examiner about how like this poll was inspired by an upcoming movie called Police State that was produced by conservative influencer Dinesh D'Souza. And I guess he's doing some advertising on social for the movie, but I hadn't heard of it yet. It's not going to be out until late October. But apparently, the premise of the movie is basically about him making the case that America is starting to resemble a third world dictatorship. And he did this interview where he talked about how he came to America as an immigrant in the late 1970s. And it was all of the freedoms that America had, like freedom of speech and the right to assemble and the right to petition the government and equal justice under the law. Like, those are all the things that made him want to come to America. And he's shocked by how all of these rights are now in jeopardy. And he commented that he's clearly not the only one with these worries because this Rasmussen poll indicates that a majority of Americans feel the same.
Okay, I gotta call it right now. This movie is gonna end up being a box office hit. It's gonna beat, all the Disney movies, just like Sound of Freedom did. And just like the guy behind Sound of Freedom, I bet any money they're gonna attack him and like make up stories that he's like a rapist or something. Like, I guarantee they're gonna do a whole full out smear campaign.
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't doubt it one bit. And then going back to what you were saying about, even Democrats are starting to, wake up to this administration. Like it's not just the Rasmussen poll that's reporting people are fed up with the Biden administration. Several other polls have come out recently. I was reading an article in the Epic Times from Monday that cited a Washington Post ABC News poll that was released on Sunday that showed the Biden administration has a disapproval rating of 56%, which is the highest disapproval rating of his presidency so far. There was an OAN article referring to the same poll that said his approval rating for handling immigration at the border is even lower at 26% approval, and nearly 60% of Democrats would prefer a different Democratic candidate for 2024. And there was an NBC News poll that came out the same day, and it showed a very similar 56% disapproval rating. And most people were basing their answers around, our failing economy with Bidenomics and concerns about Biden's age. And so let's just come out and call it what it is here. Like, it's not just age, it's fucking dementia. And even Democrat leaders are starting to speak out about this. A longtime Democratic strategist, James Carville, recently told the New York Times that poll after poll is showing voters don't want Biden in office anymore. And I read an article in Express Online that was talking about a regional Democrat leader, and they didn't name who it was, but this leader said Biden is, quote, in a period of his life where passing and death is imminent. And frankly, like, I literally don't understand how 40% of people can still approve of anything that Biden or this administration is doing. But I guess that just goes to show you how like brainwashed half of our country is by this MSM propaganda. And since we're on this topic of Biden pissing people off, I have to ask you this, Stephanie. Does it not piss you off that he had more than enough time to join the auto union workers on the picket line in Michigan this week, but he couldn't be bothered to be there for Americans in times of severe crisis, like the Maui fires or the East Palestine train derailment, or he can't even like show respect for the military during a Congressional Medal of Honor ceremony?
Yeah, it totally pisses me off, but at the same time, I'm not surprised. And like, I think it's hilarious that he's backing auto workers and going on the picket line when he's literally demanding their jobs be replaced because he wants 100% electric by 2030. And like, I'm sure these workers know that. And just what you said earlier, I was thinking the same damn thing. I'm like, who are these 40% of people that actually approve of what he's doing right now? Like, I can't imagine there's actually 40% of people. If I go out in my town right now and ask 10 people, all 10 people are going to say he's doing a terrible job. Where are they getting this 40% from, is what I want to know.
Yeah, and I live in a fairly conservative small Texas town. And I have seen a couple yard signs in my community for Biden. And that just blows my fucking mind.
Yeah.
But we're recording this episode on Tuesday morning to come out for Wednesday, and the picket line is happening today. And so I don't know yet what the details are, what like idiotic blunders Biden is going to make today, but I assure you that he will, because the incidents of him like making a complete fool out of himself and out of our country are literally happening by the day. Because even just 2 days ago, while he was hosting a conference with Pacific Island leaders, he clearly had like no idea who he was talking to, because at one point he called on the prime minister of the Cook Islands to take the floor, and he was like he looks over at the prime minister, right? In his mind, but he's not. He's looking at Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and addressing the prime minister. And Blinken had to literally point him to like be like, no, dude, he's over there. So this man literally has no fucking idea where he is half the time. So I guarantee he will say or do something incompetent on the picket line. But what I find maddening is that the White House continues to praise him as this great leader, and they're using this auto worker strike as like a way to make him seem like this total pro-America, pro-worker president. And they put out this statement saying that, you know, he's going to join the picket line and stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity with the men and women of the United Auto Workers as they fight for their fair share of the value they help create. And fucking Buttigieg referred to him as, quote, the most unapologetically pro-worker, pro-union president we've ever had. And then that dipshit AOC said this was just a, quote, historic event because we've never seen in modern history a president show up to a picket line like this. And I read this stuff and I'm like, how can anyone believe this shit?
I don't think people are. And I think AOC is digging her own grave. Did you see the video of her in New York with her Latina counterparts discussing the migrant crisis? And I mean, people were screaming so loud at her, you couldn't even hear what she was saying. And I was just thinking, like, this is in liberal New York. Like,
Yeah.
people are turning on the Democrats. And as much as that makes me think, okay, this is good, maybe things will change, I feel like they'll just cheat and find a way to stay in power. So, like, I try not to get too excited when I hear this stuff.
Yeah, but this, I gotta say, this union thing really pisses me off. And I am not anti-union. Like, I was a union member during both my law enforcement and my fire service careers. And I definitely think unions have their place for protecting workers' rights. But I don't believe a US president should be going to a picket line and making that a priority and touting that up as some, you know, major event when this man can't be bothered to show up for Americans in times of crisis because he's too busy enjoying his beach vacation. And it makes me seethe because it's yet another example of this administration's completely fucked up priorities. And, you know, you may say Biden is unapologetically pro-union, but he's also unapologetically anti-American.
Yeah, that is undeniable. And then did you hear about the Democratic Senator Bob Menendez in New Jersey that like him and his wife are being charged with violating corruption and bribery laws?
Yep.
And according to Fox News, Menendez, who chairs the powerful like Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and his wife Nadine Menendez are accused of engaging in a corrupt scheme alongside Fred Dybase, I don't know if I'm saying that right, a New Jersey real estate developer, Whale Hanna, who runs a halal meat certification business in the state, and then businessman Jose Uribe. I don't know if I'm saying any of these names right. I'm so sorry. But according to this article, he took bribes of hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Egyptian government to use his power and influence in the Senate to benefit the Egyptians. The bribes, the indictment like went on to say included cash, gold bars, home mortgage payments, compensation for no-show jobs, a luxury vehicle, and quote, other things of value. And I guess when the FBI raided his house, they found envelopes full of cash that were like stashed inside coat pockets in his house, along with gold bars. And in June of 2022, the FBI raided Menendez's residence and a safe deposit box belonging to his wife, and they found more than $480,000 in cash. And then again, like that was hidden in envelopes, and clothing, and then like some was in the safe. And then they also discovered more than $70,000 in the wife's safety deposit box. So just a lot of evidence stacking up against him, yet he is refusing to resign and keeps saying that he's going to be exonerated, and he's done nothing wrong. But this is just not a good look for Democrats right now, especially considering they have such a slim majority in the Senate.
Yeah, and I'm surprised Senate Majority Leader Dick Durbin is also not calling for Menendez to resign. And you know that if this was someone in the Republican Party or Trump or whatever, there would be no presumption of innocence. And what's like even more disturbing is this is not the first time Menendez has been indicted on bribery charges. There was a similar situation 8 years ago. So it like blows my mind. And even whack job AOC and fucking Fetterman said that Menendez should resign from his seat, which frankly I find so hypocritical considering they're both entirely incompetent. But for those two to say that he should resign, that's saying something. And so, of course, he's pulling the race card and he's saying people are trying to push him out of office because he's a Latino. Like, give me a fucking break. You're a criminal. And like, more importantly, why aren't the voters of New Jersey demanding that this guy resign?
Yeah, it's the whole thing. Like, it just looks so bad.
Yeah.
But I mean, it just goes to show like there is a lot of corruption in our government. And I think you're absolutely right. If this was a Republican, oh my God, like we
Yeah.
would be hearing all sorts of stuff from everyone about how they need to be thrown in jail for life. So it's kind of like refreshing to see a Democrat actually, you know, getting charged with something, but we'll see where it goes. I mean, he thinks he'll be exonerated, but that is a lot of evidence against him. And it'll be interesting because, like I said, there's that slim majority in the Senate. So this could end up being an opportunity for Republicans, but it's just too soon to know. Oh, and his son, Menendez's son, is running again for the House of Representatives while his father and mother are like being indicted. It's just a shit show. Like it's unbelievable. I guess no shame in DC. So yeah, that's our wrap up for the government so far, what's going on this week. And we'll keep you guys posted on all those stories and see you back here next time. Thanks for tuning in. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.